News.
Well, in studio for this conversation is Dr. Wandia Njoya, who is an education expert and a lecturer from Daystar University. We'll also have Oliver Kipchumba, who is a lawyer, with us here in studio. Later on, we're also expecting Omboko Milemba, who is the now former KUPPET chairman and Emuhaya member of Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the discussion on education reforms. And let's begin with that statement by now acting education CS Fred Matiang'i. They're saying the current education system is too intellectual. Dr. Wandia, let me begin with you. Do you agree with him?
Actually, what he said was that it was too academic. And whether it's academic or intellectual, I don't agree, because in fact, for us, people in the academy, the system is not academic enough. I think we misunderstand what academic means. Academic means rigor in studying and research and ability to share your information with other people in the field and with the public. So I think we are confusing cramming with academic, and those two are not synonymous. So the system does encourage a lot of cramming, but it's not academic, because that cramming and academic are two different things.
Right, but you understand that by the time somebody gets to university, they've gone through a whole other 844 system, or now the current 26333 system, where the cramming has already been instilled into this person. Let me come to you, Oliver. Initially, before the reforms, the rapid reforms we've seen by Fred Matiang'i, quite a large chunk of those who sat for KCSE made their way to university. But since the reforms, for the past 2 years, only about 10% of those who sit for KCSE are able to attain the cutoff points to access university education. We've been celebrating, according to some, fake grades, and fake success, so to speak. So where do we begin with reforms in higher education?
I think it must be remembered that for the last 20 years, the education sector has been, let's say, stagnating in terms of reforms. We have institutionalized an exam-based education in the place of competence-based. The change in our universities must begin from somewhere. And somewhere, the place we must begin this is instilling the values in our learners, that it is not about passing exams, but it is about your ability to have the knowledge that you will use as soon as you leave the university. We should move away from cramming, as the good doctor tells us, to where we are now working on competence. And these will require a lot of changes. And I'm happy that the reforms in the education sector will sort out these issues. We are now seeing what we can say pure, we can call them the pure grades now, as we may put it. These will enable us to know somebody is up for the task of being a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a teacher, so that we do not end up again with the problems we have faced in the Kenya School of Law, the engineers, and all this. The other problem we need to ask ourselves, how many actuaries do we produce in each graduation? But we do not have as much actuaries or actuaries firms in this country. So it means that in between there is a problem somewhere. And I think if we address the entire education reform, we will get it right.
All right. And Dr. Wandia, of course, seems to think it is not intellectual, it is not academic enough in the education sector. But what about the quality of education being accessed? Because I understand by 2012, we had about 35 universities in the country. By 2016, that had doubled to 70 universities. And there's all these colleges. We've seen Fred Matiang'i trying to deregister some colleges, depending on the quality of education being offered. What is the quality of education in our universities?
I think we need to back up and look at how did we get where we did. And this problem started in the 80s with the structural adjustment programs. The World Bank said that African countries should not be funding higher education. So what happened was when the universities got less money, they had to find a way of making up for the deficit of funding. And that's when we started this marketing of programs, parallel programs after 2000, so that universities could make enough money to run themselves. So that compromised quality, because now they started admitting many students, but not increasing in terms of facilities or lecturers and all that. So that's where the problem is. The problem is mainly economic, and it has now affected the classroom. So I find it very interesting that people are just focusing on the curriculum and on lecturers. We are always being blamed, and yet this problem is an economic problem. If governments do not fund public education, then they must not be surprised when there's a decline in the quality of education. And that is what has happened in Kenya and in many African countries. We are not the only ones. It's just that, of course, because this is our country, we feel the pain, but this is a phenomenon that is being witnessed across a lot of African countries because of lack of funding for higher education. Yeah.
And of course, that, according to other critics, has impacted on the quality of academic staff that we see in some of the universities and colleges because of issues of remuneration. And that is why Education CS Fred Matiang'i is now bringing in the issue that universities will be required to hire staff on contract and abolish permanent and pensionable terms. Something that has been received with quite a lot of resistance, especially from lecturers themselves. What do you make of this, Oliver? Because the very issue, or the very perception of having lecturers or professors on contract, to some does not sit very well.
I will tend to think what we need to make it as the core subject around the issues of lecturers is productivity. Whether on permanent or contract, are they productive? Are we seeing value for our money? The other thing you need to understand is that the issue of lecturers, we have fewer people who are willing to go back to the university and lecture. Therefore, we have some sort of the number to the lecturer to learner ratio is very high, and this leads to issues of having one lecturer lecturing in around 5 universities.
Right.
This one affects the quality of education in the long run because the concentration on a learner is not there. So I think we need to come up with a formula whereby we will, one, put incentives for more people to go and lecture, and put the standard such that there is productivity. It is not all about churning out people, but churning people who the market needs. If you ask yourself, have we been churning out graduates who are geared towards Vision 2030? I'll say no. Because what we teach and what is outside here, there is a lot of difference. So that is where we need to focus, not on the issues of permanent or pensionable. And the main issue will be now to put incentives so that we can also avoid these strikes. The strikes, reoccurrence of strikes also goes to affect the quality of education in those universities.
Right.
Because also this speaks to the lecturer. Do they have the urge to teach?
Right.
We need now to improve incentives.
Right.
Can I just
please, Dr.
say
Ade.
this, that if we use the market language, the neoliberal market language to understand higher education, we are going to get lost because teachers and faculty do need permanent and pensionable terms, because if there's no job security, then that is why they go job hopping, because they need to make sure that they have enough money in the bank, because they don't know whether they're going to be teaching next semester, and yet rent still has to be paid, children have to still go to school. So if we start using contracts, actually it's going to make the sector worse, not better. Teachers and lecturers do need permanent and pensionable terms. Now, I think we are confusing. I think the way I'm hearing the CS, he sounds like he's trying to copy the American system where even them, they are removing tenure for lecturers. And it is causing a lot of havoc even there for university students, because now lecturers are not committed to, they are more worried about paying bills, and also, like Oliver says, they are teaching more classes which they cannot cope with. They can't do research. So I think we are just focusing on the wrong thing by removing the security for lecturers. We need to fund education. We need to fund higher education because it gives us a return to the whole society. It's for the public good. So if we start reducing it and start treating lecturers like casuals, then we must accept that we will get a casual higher education system.
I'm out to take a short break. We'll come back on the same. But how then do you suggest that with permanent employment and with that job security, how would you suggest an increase in productivity as Oliver Kitrumba here is talking about?
Again, productivity is very problematic because you cannot expect lecturers to take time to do research when they have to teach 5 classes with 500 students each. I think we need to start talking about the terms under which lecturers are working. We are overworked and underpaid. And in fact, the public universities are doing quite badly in terms of remuneration for lecturers and giving them time off to study. On top of that, we are expected to look for research funds, and when we do get them, the universities, because they are so short of cash, they eat the money which is meant for research, and then it looks like the problem is the lecturers. There's a big managerial neoliberal problem in the universities, and that's what needs to be talked about. And usually when you hear policymakers focusing on lecturers, it means that they are avoiding the bigger issues which need to be addressed. And the biggest issue in university education is funding. As long as we don't fund, we should expect bad education.
Okay, and so funding is something we'll be discussing in a bit more detail right here on The Way It Is. After this short break, we're speaking to Dr. Wandia Njoya, who is an education expert and a lecturer at the Daystar University, as well as Oliver Kipchumba, who is a lawyer and an analyst, joining us here on Morning Express. Do stay tuned. The conversation